You know, not every civilization leaves behind a lasting legacy like the Elegant Empire, or rages against its own demise like Garlemald. Some cultures go out with a whimper, and some you'd never even know existed in the first place. Scala was one such culture, and today, my friends, we will uncover why. Gather around as we dive headfirst into the dungeon that is the drowned city of Skalla. Our story begins in the 5th Astral Era, during the Age of Enlightenment, when all things magical was at its peak. The nation of Skalla was one of at least a dozen unique city-states that arose in Eorzea during this time, alongside well-known countries like Amdapor, Nim, and Mok. While some countries desired to challenge the sky with their architecture, the people of Skalla had a different idea. Instead of going up, Skalla went down and carved their city out of a steep-walled ravine. After several hundred years of development, they finally stopped building and reveled in the land they had made for themselves. By all accounts I could find, the stone city of Skalla was considered a modest nation that never did more than it saw was necessary. It would seem they preferred to keep to themselves, using the natural defenses of the ravine as a choke point against any and all would-be invaders. Having existed during an age of unshackled magic, it can be assumed that Skalla had developed and studied their own forms of arcane manipulation. What these spell schools and rituals were, however, have been lost to time, and the blame for this loss of invaluable history can be laid at the feet of Mok. I have no records of what the stone city of Skalla did during the War of the Magi between Amdapor and Mok, but a lack of clear evidence suggests they likely tried to stay out of the war and keep to themselves, regrouping within their well-defended city-state. However, this wouldn't be enough, as it's likely the war found its way to Skalla either way due to Mok's aggressive campaign. Some people may have been conquered and added to Mok's growing army, or others might have fled trying to escape the war entirely. Either way, the arrogance and abuse of power demonstrated by the black mages and white mages would eventually cause irreversible damage to the world's etheric balance. And by the time they realized what they had done, it was far, far too late. The Sixth Emerald Calamity would seal Skalla's fate. Normally, the way Skalla was constructed would have made it so natural water would flow through the city without worry. Even an excessively rainy season wouldn't have put them in danger due to their foresight. But the calamity of water was unlike anything they could have prepared for, as the entire world would be subjected to the rising tides. I don't know how the nation reacted to the calamity, as there's no records of a mass exodus like that of Mok or Amdapor. However, it's commonly accepted that the stone city of Skalla was likely abandoned before the end of the War of the Magi. Where the people of Skalla went and what they did is ultimately a mystery, but eventually they'd have to face the same trials as the rest of the world, because the calamity was on a scale they couldn't have possibly imagined. And in time, the floods would sweep through their ravine, and eventually fill it completely. The waters submerged everything the city had ever known, and the great stone city of Skalla had officially become the Drowned City. It wouldn't be until an entire century later in the Sixth Astral Era that these water-filled halls would know people again. In the year 1135 of the Sixth Astral Era, the nation of Alamigo would be built on top of Skalla's watery grave, and they didn't even know. It wasn't until later in Alamigo's history that Skalla's remains would be discovered, and by then, only a handful of people knew about it. After all, Alamigo was never seen as a scholarly nation, so when Skalla was found, it wasn't made public knowledge, and exploration of these ruins were limited to groups of trusted individuals. Eventually, they managed to unearth and drain some of the ruins, but didn't investigate too heavily into Skalla's culture before thinking of ways on how to use these underground tunnels to Alamigo's benefit. Unfortunately, the only person to get real use out of Skalla's hidden location would be none other than Theodoric, the Mad King. Like his title suggests, Theodoric was a crazed and paranoid ruler. Even after executing the monks of Girabania and burning the Temple of the Fist, Theodoric still saw threats in every corner of his castle. Shadows questioning his rule and whispers ready to depose him. Despite how bad the people of Alamigo think they had it under his reign, Theodoric's relatives would suffer even more. The Mad King would eventually declare that all of his family members, both immediate and extended, were trying to take his crown for themselves and accused all of them of high treason on completely fabricated charges. His first act was to seize all of their wealth and earnings, but instead of keeping these vast treasures in Alamigo's castle, he hid the wealth of their nation in the ruins of Scala, a place few people knew about. What's worse, Theodoric hired foreign mages gifted in the arts of thaumaturgy to place spells and runes throughout Scala as a means of defending his hoard. I wish I could say it ended there, but now the Mad King would be deciding how best to punish his relatives. Death and public humiliation were too good for them, so instead he ordered the use of forbidden magic to turn his own family into monsters and beasts that would be bound to Scala and forced to defend his wealth for all eternity. The one who suffered the greatest from this punishment was Theodoric's own cousin, a gentleman named Herodric. Herodric was a man who had a strong sense of justice and conviction, and on multiple occasions tried to be the king's voice of reason. But unfortunately, his counsel always fell on deaf ears, and eventually, Herodric's constant questioning of the Mad King's methods marked him as a traitor. He was labeled as a poison-tongued monster that was out to get Theodoric just like everyone else. Herodric's sentence was that he would become the beast that Theodoric saw him as, and made him to be the last line of defense against any trespassers in the ruins of Scala. Eventually, the drowned city of Scala would be properly rediscovered through an investigation performed by the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. During this exploration, they would not only clear out the monsters that have been roosting in the caves, but also came upon a golem that was clearly related to the Far East. While no one knows exactly why or how it got here, it's theorized that Theodoric had it brought over from the Far Eastern nations to act as a sentry. This was due to the fact that the Mad King had a common belief that the only people and things he could completely trust were the things outside of his own nation. Though eventually, the adventurers would run into the twisted monsters that were once the family members of the Mad King. All that was left was the colossal beast that Herodric had become. Thankfully, the Scions proved themselves better than the thaumaturgy that transformed him, and good Sir Herodric was finally able to rest. With the spells broken and monsters slain, the Mad King's trove was there for the taking. But instead of keeping it for themselves, the Scions assisted in helping Alamigo's new interim government distribute this wealth so that the recently liberated country might be able to rebuild its economy. And that, my friends, is the complete story behind the drowned city of Scala. Unfortunately, we don't have much on the city's original history. The calamity of water destroyed any books or scrolls that would have provided such information, and initial research into Scala's architecture hasn't revealed much yet. That, and it's extremely likely that Alamigo's investigation teams weren't delicate with their initial exploration, so there's no telling what they may or may not have destroyed during the city's rediscovery. All we know for certain is that the active spell circles, golems, and etheric monsters did not belong to Scala, and were instead placed there by Theodoric by his foreign thaumaturges. It's likely we might never know more about Scala other than its watery end, and that will simply have to be enough. They were yet another civilization made to pay for the hubris of Mach, just like the scholars of Nim. But that will be all from me for now. I hope you found this tale satisfactory, as I will need to continue traveling to uncover more history for you. So, until next we meet, stay safe, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Big shout out to my patrons, Rovakis, Monsolo97, Potato, Runeteer, The Yellow Couch, Papaya, Cyan, Sage Mouse, and Volvolisoma. If you want to see more lore content in the future, share this with your friends. My dream is to share as much as I find with as many people as possible. And if you do end up helping me, thank you so much in advance. And have a wonderful day.